to committing to doing Wholesome Halloween, Little Shop of Horrors was always kind of in my peripheral. I'd seen it referenced in many things. It was a big enough cult phenomenon that I was very aware that it existed. I knew it was the man-eating plant movie, and I was fairly certain it had Rick Moranis in it, but I'd not seen it. I always thought it was something I'd probably enjoy, but it felt like one of those things where there was such a strong nostalgia attached to it for a lot of people who'd either seen it young and grew up with it or had strong memories of the stage show, that if you approached it as an outsider of the kind of cult fandom that surrounded it, you might like it, but you never quite get it the way some people do. So I'm here now to tell you that I was mistaken in this assumption, and 1986's Little Shop of Horrors fucking rules, and I am obsessed with it. Directed by Frank Oz, yes, that is Yoda and Miss Piggy, and adapted from the hit musical, which in itself was adapted from the 1960 movie, Little Shop of Horrors is a horror rock comedy telling the story of Seymour, a poverty-stricken and unthreatening Poindexter of a person portrayed excellently by Rick Moranis, who alongside the somewhat ditzy but well-intentioned Audrey work for a failing plant store owned by Mr. Mushnick in a crappy rundown town called Skid Row. Seymour and Audrey both long for better lives, somewhere far away from the everyday poverty they exist in, but it looks like they're shit out of luck when business at Cushnick's is so bad he briefly considers closing the store. Their luck seems to change though when a mysterious and unique looking plant that Seymour purchased during a solar eclipse, which he dubs Audrey 2 in honor of his secret feelings for his colleague, begins to attract new customers to the store. However, when the plant starts to wither and die, Seymour finds out that the only thing that keeps it alive is human blood. Feeding it from his fingers, the plant grows to absurd sizes, gaining the shop more attention and success. As the plant grows in mass, however, it also grows in appetite, eventually gaining sentience and demanding Seymour bring it human sacrifices, promising Seymour fame and fortune in return. It's a fun as hell plot, and it all comes wrapped up in this excellent 60s setting where the world feels like a cartoon in the best possible way. Everything from the backdrops to the exaggerated performances to the absolute banger musical numbers just immerses you in this wonderfully kitsch and camp hyper reality. It feels almost like there's a conscious effort to make everything look like physical sets, which, when done accidentally, can look really cheap, but here, done with deliberate intention, makes it feel more like a stage show than any other musical adaptation I could think of. Tonally speaking, this movie is flawless. The filmmakers obviously had a clear vision of exactly how they wanted things to look and feel and nailed it perfectly. Something that's reflected even in just the casting. I can literally think of no better person to play Seymour than Rick Moranis. He's always great at playing these dweeby underdog types, but who knew he had some pipes? Gone on, lad! The fella absolutely kills it in every musical number, switching between downtrodden, defeated, introspective melodies to blasting out ballads with ease. And hell, Ellen Green is so pitch perfect as Audrey that despite being in her 60s now, she still gets cast in the stage show opposite guys like Jake Gyllenhaal playing Seymour. Like, Ellen Green is Audrey. She has a manner of delivery that's honestly inimitable. It's like this sort of high-pitched, slightly lisped cadence that just completely sells exactly who she's supposed to be. It's such a fully realized idiosyncrasy that you know exactly what she's all about from just her utterance of a single sentence. And it walks this extremely fine line of being just quirky and hammy enough to be memorable and totally unique while also adding to the whole kitsch atmosphere of the production, but not so quirky as to be off-putting and annoying. In anything other than Little Shop of Horrors, this manner of speaking and singing would be obnoxious as hell. But here, it's just perfect. Honestly, everybody who worked on or was acting in this film is just giving it 1,000,000% and batting home runs every time. I mean, I've only mentioned the two leads here, and they're definitely not even my favourite part of the film. My absolute highlight goes to Steve Martin, who plays a more minor role as Audrey's sadist dentist boyfriend. This dude is just the greatest, and his balls to the wall musical number featuring him going around his dental surgery and just choreographically beating the shit out of all of his patients and staff could very well be the greatest 2 minutes and 30 seconds of your life. It's a bombastic, show-stealing performance that absolutely chews the scenery, and you just can't take your eyes away from him whenever he's on screen. Every little detail, from the costume to the movement to the way he parks his motorbike, is just full of, I'm gonna say it, raw sexual energy. This movie is so good, it kinda makes me fancy Steve Martin. What? I think it's the movement he does after coming out of the cupboard at the end of the song that does it for me. What is this kick thing? How can a movement look so ridiculous and yet so natural? I don't understand it, it baffles me. Really hot though. Man, the people in this film really understand what they're in. I actually read that Steve Martin contributed a lot of ideas to this section.
Like tearing the head off the doll and punching the assistant.
Something that you would have assumed would have been in the first draft because, like, of course the dentist character would do that, was actually just an on-the-day decision made by the performer.
Same with Bill Murray, who cameos later on as a masochistic dental patient who improvised every single one of his lines and did different versions every take. You get the sense that absolutely everyone is having the time of their life on this production, and it shows.
And you know who gives one of the best performances the entire movie? The bloody plant.
Brought to life with an iconic voice supplied by soul and R&B singer Levi Stubbs, as well as what can only be described as genuinely masterful puppetry of an elaborate rig put together by Lyle Conway of the Muppets and Dark Crystal fame. The work the puppeteers and editors did on this thing is just incredible. I mean, there's multiple moving parts, different builds for different stages of its life cycle, and they built 3 different versions of Mushnik's shop at different scales to better shoot the plant at different sizes. But you know what's most impressive of all? It's lip-synced. Like, perfectly lip-synced with every single line of dialogue it has. Look how complex this thing is! By the end of the film, this is a 1-ton puppet that takes 60 people to operate, and they managed to make the thing dance and sing? What?! They had to shoot it at lowered frame rates, and certain scenes had to be filmed with actors performing in slow motion and then sped up in post just to achieve this effect, but absolutely none of this behind the scenes tinkering comes across in the final thing. Never a point where Audrey 2 doesn't feel tangibly alive and physically present. I cannot overstate how remarkable a feat this is. So yeah, the movie's great. The music is catchy, the cartoonish presentation is joyously good fun, and the characters are innately lovable, and the whimsical love story that ties the 2 leads together is a blast to watch play out. If you're looking for a good, fun, horror-themed musical to watch this wholesome Halloween, it's a silly dumb delight, and I defy you to not smile with glee at a movie where a plant gets a fucking gun.
Oh, and it's also quoted to be about the dangers of consumer culture and modern American capitalism. Well, it is. Seymour's attempt to escape from hopeless poverty, Audrey 2's urgings direct him to do whatever it takes to succeed. Far from being an innocent and heroic character, Seymour emerges as simply weak-willed and unable to resist the temptation to exploit others for personal gain. All of the characters Audrey 2 eats in the 1986 version of the film stand as obstacles to Seymour's happiness or social mobility. These are the words of Mark Jensen from his academic journal Feed Me, Power Struggles and the Portrayal of Race in Little Shop of Horrors. American cinema has long been infatuated with the idea of the movie monster as an allegory for its ideological enemies. The 50s in particular as a decade was littered with films full of anti-communist rhetoric that captured the cultural paranoia of the time. Some of them were even really good.
Movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers would often warn of this hidden infiltration of middle America, where the white picket fence suburban neighbor you'd grown to love was quietly being replaced with a uniformed group of alien citizens who looked just like us but without any semblance of individuality. And that's obviously just one of the more famous examples. Other films like Invaders from Mars, Red Planet Mars.
These films really like Mars, because it's red, get it? They weren't subtle.
Them, The Flying Saucer, these films were a dime a dozen, all of them threatening some kind of secret invasion or nuclear threat. So much so that my personal hero Rod Serling, absolute legend, I love him so much, even subverted the political messaging of these films in 1960 with his fantastic Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, in which the alien invasion is carried out not with threats of nuclear holocaust or hidden acts of violence, but with the aliens simply flicking a few people's power on and off, and it's enough to drive an entire neighborhood into paranoid infighting.
The episode then closes with the aliens getting back on their spaceship as Serling narrates, "The tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. They are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitude, prejudices, to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicion can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own. For the children and the children yet unborn, and the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone." Twilight Zone's fucking good, innit? Which brings us full circle back to Little Shop of Horrors. I think one of the reasons that I love it so much that I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since my first viewing is that besides it being so damn fun, it also, like Monsters Are Due on Maple Street before it, provides a valuable alternative version of the alien invasion allegory of these period of movies.
Maintaining the 60s backdrop of the original film sets it firmly at a point in America where McCarthyism was still a lingering mentality in the American psyche. However, in this instance, it's capitalism, the oppositional economic theory to communism that these monsters from outer space would usually criticize, that becomes the target for the satire.
And it is not subtle. Like at all.
Poverty is the running threat that acts as a catalyst to all the film's events. Our lead characters are trapped in the economic poverty of circumstance. Seymour, an orphan who feels he has to work for Mushnick out of some kind of moral as well as financial debt to the man who gave him a job when he had nowhere else to go, often sings of the feeling of being trapped and his desire to escape Skid Row. And Audrey, a victim of abuse in her childhood, finds herself trapped in a cycle of violence, pursuing relationships with men like the dentist due to her feeling undeserving of affection from men as a result of her childhood trauma. Something that is revealed in her solo song Somewhere That's Green. The two both dream of better lives, Audrey in particular fantasizing about the American dream of the white picket fence and the nuclear family. When Audrey 2 enters the narrative, Seymour is presented with a way out of all of these struggles, and, more importantly to the allegory, is promised by the all-consuming Audrey 2 in a not-so-subtle metaphor for capitalism, fame, and fortune. All you have to do, Seymour, is give in to your base desires and not care about anybody else. Let me grow into an all-consuming entity, literally feeding me the blood of other people. Some may die along the way, but think of all the money you'll make, and then girls will like you. Though Seymour is initially a reluctant party in this murder fest, he does subside because ultimately he has this perception that his social value is inherently tied to his success and wealth. This is something he actually confides in Audrey later in the film. By the final act of the movie, the real threat of terror doesn't come from the single Audrey 2, but rather the rapid consumer culture that grows around the plant. Businessmen and media enterprises clamour for the opportunity to profit from it, spreading word of plant worldwide and attempting to resell Audrey 2s of their own, which could threaten all of America.
The film somewhat undermines its own messaging when, at the end of the final act, Audrey 2 is killed and Seymour and Audrey 1 move into their dream house and live happily ever after. However, that's the theatrical cut, which only exists because test screenings reacted very negatively to the ending that Frank Oz and team had initially wanted, on the count of it being a lot bleaker.
Our two heroes are consumed, literal victims of the greed Seymour fed into, and in scenes reminiscent of Black Friday sales, we see hundreds of people purchasing their own Audrey 2 plants, something possible because greedy businessmen used a legal loophole of plants belonging to the public domain to replicate Audrey 2 as a mass-produced product. We then see dramatic scenes of America falling victim to this consumer craze as the plants grow and begin to take over the earth and destroy and eat everything in sight. The final image of the film being the now humongous Audrey 2 laughing atop the Statue of Liberty as the US Army fails to prevent the plant army's uprising.
It's really great stuff, but I can see why it didn't sit well with test audiences. I mean, for a funny, goofy musical, seeing the two lovers you've been massively invested in then get eaten and everybody die is, well, kinda grim, innit? And probably a little bit too much for an audience expecting something more along the lines of Rocky Horror unless there will be blood. Doesn't make the movie any less enjoyable to me though. Hell, it just makes the commentary better. And at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that the plant sings and gets a fucking gun. I mean, Jesus, it's amazing. What more do you want? And hey, in the theatrical ending, everything is a-okay. The American dream is alive and well and we all live happily ever after. Just don't ask any questions about the real ending or watch the stage play if that's what you want, because we definitely all die in that one. Subscribe to my Only Dance and I'll see you next time.